Captain Veltar pressed his four-fingered hand against the smooth wall of the bridge. The metal felt cold beneath his translucent blue skin. Around him, warning lights blinked red and yellow. The ship's main engine had died 3 hours ago, leaving them floating in empty space like a dead leaf in water. "Status report," he said in his soft voice. His people, the Altarians, never shouted or raised their voices. Violence was unknown to them. Their home world was a peaceful place where storms never came, and all creatures lived in harmony. Communications, Officer Zefki looked up from her station. Her large silver eyes reflected worry. She belonged to the Vasari race, beings who could feel the emotions of others. Right now she felt the fear radiating from every crew member on the ship. "The engines are completely dead, Captain," she said. "We lost all power to the main drive when that energy surge hit us. Engineer Kolvak says it will take weeks to repair, maybe months." "We don't have that long." Veltar nodded slowly. He looked out at the stars through the main window. They were beautiful as always. Billions of points of light scattered across the darkness. But now they seemed cold and distant. The research vessel Harmony's Light had been exploring this unknown region of space for 2 months. They were scientists, not soldiers. Their mission was to study strange energy readings that their sensors had detected from this area. "How much life support do we have?" Veltar asked. Dr. Mirana spoke from her science station. She was Vasari like Zefki, with the same silver eyes and pale skin. 4 days of air at current consumption rates. Maybe 5 if we shut down non-essential systems. The bridge fell quiet except for the soft humming of computers. 23 crew members were aboard the Harmony's Light. All of them were from peaceful races that had never known war. The Altarians like Veltar were philosophers and artists. The Vasari were empaths who helped others with their emotional problems. The Nexari were mathematicians who could solve complex equations in their heads. None of them were fighters. None of them knew how to handle real danger. "Begin broadcasting our distress signal," Veltar ordered. "Use all frequencies. Someone will hear us." Zefki's fingers moved across her control panel. "Signal broadcasting now, Captain. I'm sending our position, ship status, and crew manifest. Any Confederation vessel in range should pick it up within hours." The Galactic Confederation was their government. It included hundreds of peaceful species spread across thousands of worlds. They all shared the same basic values: cooperation, harmony, and the pursuit of knowledge. War was something that primitive species engaged in before they developed true civilization. Every intelligent race eventually learned that working together was better than fighting. At least that's what they all believed. Engineer Kolvak entered the bridge. He was Nexari, tall and thin with pale green skin and no hair. His species thought in pure logic, rarely showing emotion, but even he looked troubled. "Captain, I've examined the damage," and he said. "The energy surge that hit us wasn't natural. The patterns suggest it was some kind of weapon blast, though I can't understand what would fire at a research vessel." "A weapon?" Veltar felt confused. "But we're in unexplored space. There are no Confederation ships out here, and we haven't detected any alien presence." "That's what worries me," Kolvak replied. "If someone attacked us, they're using technology we don't understand. And they're hiding from our sensors." Dr. Mirana looked up from her readings. "I've been analyzing the energy signature. Kolvak is right. This wasn't an accident or a natural phenomenon. Someone disabled our ship deliberately." A chill ran through the bridge crew. The idea that someone would attack them without reason made no sense. In all of Confederation history, conflicts were solved through discussion and compromise. Violence was the mark of a primitive mind. "Perhaps it was a misunderstanding," Veltar said hopefully. "If we can establish communication, we can explain that we're peaceful explorers. Any intelligent species would understand." Hours passed slowly. The crew worked to conserve power and air while their distress signal broadcast into the void. They recorded messages for their families back home, just in case. They also prepared their scientific data to be transmitted to Confederation space. Their research into the strange energy readings might be valuable to other scientists. Veltar walked through the ship's corridors, checking on his crew. In the science labs, researchers continued their work despite their situation. They measured stellar radiation and cosmic background noise. It's what they always did when faced with problems. They studied and learned. In the medical bay, Dr. Silara treated crew members who were showing signs of stress. Her Vasari abilities let her feel their fear and anxiety. She tried to project calm thoughts to help them stay focused. "Captain, she said when Veltar visited her. "The crew is holding together well, but they're scared. We've never faced anything like this before. Our people don't have experience with real danger." "I know," Veltar replied, "but someone will come. The Confederation has thousands of ships spread across the galaxy. One of them will hear our signal and rescue us." He wanted to believe his own words. The Confederation was built on the idea that no one would be left behind. Every member species had committed to helping others in need. It was the foundation of their civilization. On the second day, their situation grew worse. A coolant leak in the engine room forced them to shut down another life support system. They now had less than 3 days of air remaining. The crew gathered in the main dining hall to share what might be their last meal together. "I want everyone to know," Veltar told them, "that serving with you has been an honor. If we don't make it home, our families will remember us as explorers who pushed the boundaries of knowledge." The crew nodded quietly. Many of them held hands, sharing comfort through touch. It was their way of facing fear, together with dignity and grace. Zefki continued broadcasting their distress signal around the clock. Her equipment showed that the signal was reaching far into space, but no one answered. The silence was deafening. "Maybe we're too far from Confederation space," she suggested. "Our signal might not reach any of our ships." "Keep trying," Veltar said. "Someone will hear us." Intelligence naturally develops toward compassion and cooperation. Any spacefaring race would help those in need. It was what they had been taught since childhood. Primitive species might fight and kill each other, but truly advanced civilizations understood that all life was precious. The galaxy was vast and dangerous enough without intelligent beings adding to the threats. On the third day, their hope began to fade. Oxygen levels dropped steadily. Some crew members had trouble breathing. Dr. Silara moved through the ship, helping people stay calm as their situation became desperate. Veltar stood on the bridge, looking out at the stars. They seemed more distant than ever. Somewhere out there, on hundreds of worlds, their families waited for them to return. Children expected their parents to come home with stories of new discoveries. Students waited for their teachers to return to the universities. "Captain," Zefki said suddenly, "I'm getting something. It's faint, but there's a signal responding to our distress call." Hope flickered in Veltar's chest. "Can you identify the source?" "Not yet. The signal is using an unknown frequency pattern. My computers are trying to decode it now." The bridge crew gathered around Zefki's station, watching as her equipment worked to translate the incoming transmission. After several minutes, words began to appear on her screen. "Message received and understood. Help is coming. Maintain position." Veltar felt relief wash over him like cool water. "Send a reply. Tell them our situation and how many crew members we have." But as he watched Zefki work, a small worry began to grow in his mind. The responding signal was unlike anything in Confederation databases. Whoever was coming to help them was not from any known peaceful species. He pushed the thought away. In the galaxy, intelligence meant civilization, and civilization meant peace. The signal that answered their distress call grew stronger over the next few hours. Zefki worked frantically at her communication station, trying to establish better contact with their rescuers. But something about the transmissions made her uncomfortable. The sounds coming through the static were harsh and aggressive, nothing like the melodious tones of Confederation languages. "Captain," she called to Veltar, "I'm having trouble with the translation matrix. Their language patterns are completely unknown. The computer keeps giving me error messages." Veltar moved to her station and looked at the scrolling data. Strange symbols filled the screen, angular and sharp where Confederation writing was flowing and curved. Even the mathematical constants seemed wrong somehow. "How long until they arrive?" he asked. "Based on their last transmission, perhaps 6 hours. But Captain, there's something else. I'm detecting multiple ships approaching, not just one rescue vessel." Dr. Mirana looked up from her science station with concern.
"Multiple ships?"
"That seems excessive for a simple rescue operation." Engineer Kolvak joined them, carrying a datapad with sensor readings. "I've been analyzing their approach vectors. The ships are maintaining a formation pattern I don't recognize. It looks almost military in nature." The word military hung in the air like a bad smell. None of them really understood what it meant. The Confederation had a small fleet of ships that helped with disasters and exploration, but they weren't weapons of war. War was something that happened in ancient history, before species learned to think properly. Perhaps they're just being cautious, Veltar suggested. If they detected the energy weapon that disabled us, they might be worried about their own safety. But as the hours passed, their rescuers' signals became more disturbing. The transmissions were sharp and clipped, full of numbers and codes that made no sense. Sometimes they heard what sounded like shouting in the background. The universal translator finally managed to pick up a few words. Sector clear, no hostiles detected, and strangest of all, weapons hot. Dr. Mirana felt waves of emotion from the approaching ships that made her skin crawl. Where Confederation minds radiated calm and peace, these beings projected something she had never felt before. Controlled aggression mixed with deadly purpose. It was like sensing the thoughts of a predator. "Captain," she said quietly, "I don't think these are peaceful explorers like us." "What do you mean?" Feltar asked. "I can feel their minds from here, even at this distance. They're different. Their thought patterns are focused on conflict and dominance. It's completely alien to anything I've encountered." The bridge fell silent except for the humming of electronics. Feltar tried to process this information. In all of Confederation history, every intelligent species had been peaceful. It was a universal law. Beings smart enough to build spaceships were smart enough to solve problems without violence. "There must be some mistake," he said finally. "Perhaps their culture expresses friendship differently than ours. We should prepare a proper greeting ceremony." But as their rescuers drew closer, the crew of Harmony's Light became increasingly nervous. Long-range sensors showed the approaching vessels, and their design was unlike anything in Confederation databases. Where their own ships were smooth and elegant, built for beauty as much as function, these craft looked brutal and practical. Sefki managed to get a visual image on the main screen. The crew gasped at what they saw. 5 massive ships moved toward them in perfect formation. Their hulls were dark gray and covered with strange protrusions that could only be weapons. Scars and burn marks showed where they had been damaged in some kind of conflict. Energy readings indicated power levels far beyond anything the Confederation had ever built. "By the 7 stars," whispered Dr. Silara. "Those ships are designed for war." Engineer Kolvak studied the sensor data with growing alarm. "Captain, those vessels are heavily armed. I count dozens of weapon systems on each ship, and their armor plating is at least 3 times thicker than ours." "But why would explorers need so many weapons?" Veltar asked. No one had an answer. The concept of actually using violence to solve problems was so foreign to them that they couldn't understand it. In their minds, intelligence naturally led to peace. Any species that still used violence couldn't be truly civilized. The lead ship moved closer to Harmony's Light. Up close, it looked even more intimidating. Strange symbols were painted on its hull in red and white, angular designs that hurt to look at. The ship itself was enormous, at least 10 times larger than their research vessel. A new transmission came through, clearer than before. The voice that spoke was deep and rough, with an accent that the translator struggled to process. "Unknown vessel. This is Commander Chen of the Terran Colonial Marines. We received your distress signal. Prepare to be boarded for rescue operations." The crew looked at each other in confusion. Terran wasn't in any of their databases. And what were Colonial Marines? The title suggested some kind of military organization. But why would military personnel be conducting rescue operations? "Respond to them," Veltar ordered. "Tell them we're grateful for their assistance and that we're prepared to receive them aboard." Zefki sent the message, her voice shaking slightly. The response came back immediately. "Copy that. Stand by for docking procedures. Keep your crew away from the airlocks until we give the all-clear." Dr. Mirana felt a spike of alarm from the approaching ship. The emotions she sensed were intense and focused, like the mental state of someone preparing for battle. But there was no battle here, just a simple rescue operation. "Captain," she said urgently, "something's wrong. Their emotional patterns suggest they're expecting danger. They're prepared to fight." "Fight whom?" Veltar asked. "We're the only ones here." Through the main window they watched as the massive ship moved into position above them. Mechanical arms extended from its hull, reaching toward their vessel like the claws of some enormous predator. The docking process was violent and aggressive, nothing like the gentle procedures used by Confederation ships. Metal clanged against metal as the docking clamps locked into place. The sound echoed through their hull like thunder. Several crew members jumped at the noise. They had never heard anything so harsh and industrial. Warning lights flashed on the bridge. "They're cutting through our outer airlock," reported Kolvak. "They're not waiting for us to cycle it open properly." Sparks flew as some kind of cutting tool worked on their hull. The crew of Harmony's Light huddled together, watching their rescuers force their way aboard. This wasn't how civilized beings behaved. This was more like what primitive animals might do. Dr. Silara felt a wave of fear wash over the crew. "Everyone stay calm," she projected mentally, trying to use her empathic abilities to keep panic from spreading. But even she was frightened by what she sensed from the other ship. The cutting stopped. For a moment there was silence. Then their airlock exploded inward. Smoke filled the corridor as dark shapes moved through the breach. The crew could hear heavy footsteps and harsh voices speaking in that strange language. Metal clanked as the beings moved through their ship, checking corners and spaces as if they expected enemies to be hiding there. "Secure the area," they heard someone shout. "Check for hostiles." But there were no hostiles aboard Harmony's Light. There were only peaceful scientists who had never hurt anyone in their lives. Beltar stood up straight, preparing to greet their rescuers with proper diplomatic courtesy. Whatever species these beings were, they had answered the distress call and come to help. That showed they had good intentions even if their methods were strange. The bridge door slid open. Armored figures stepped through, carrying weapons that hummed with deadly energy. Their faces were hidden behind masks and helmets that made them look like machines rather than living beings. They moved with precise military efficiency, checking every corner of the bridge before lowering their weapons. The largest figure stepped forward and removed its helmet. Beltar and his crew stared in shock at the face revealed beneath. It was humanoid but wrong in every way. The eyes were set forward like a predator's, small and intense. The mouth showed white teeth that came to sharp points. Scars marked the dark skin. Evidence of violence survived. Most disturbing of all, the being looked at them with obvious assessment, as if determining whether they were threats to be eliminated or merely obstacles to be managed. This was not how civilized beings behaved. This was how predators acted when entering the territory of prey. For the first time in their lives, the crew of Harmony's Light truly understood what it meant to be afraid. The being that removed its helmet was clearly female, though unlike any female the crew had ever seen. Her short black hair was practical rather than decorative. Her face showed no softness or gentleness. Instead, she had the hard features of someone who had seen too much violence and survived it all. She looked around the bridge with quick, efficient movements. Her eyes, those forward-facing predator eyes, took in every detail. She noted the positions of the crew, the locations of the exits, and the status of the ship's systems. It was the behavior of a hunter evaluating its environment. "I'm Commander Sarah Chen, Terran Colonial Marines," she said in a voice that carried absolute authority. "Which one of you is in charge here?" Captain Veltar stepped forward, trying to maintain his dignity despite his fear. "I am Captain Veltar of the research vessel Harmony's Light. We're grateful for your assistance, Commander." Sarah Chen studied him with those disturbing eyes. "Research vessel? What were you researching out here?" "We detected unusual energy signatures in this sector," Veltar explained. "We came to investigate, but our ship was damaged by some kind of weapon blast." Behind Commander Chen, her soldiers remained alert and ready. They held their weapons casually, but Veltar could see they were prepared to use them instantly. These beings moved like they expected violence at any moment. "Weapon blast?" Chen's expression sharpened. "Show me your sensor logs." Engineer Kolvak hesitated, then activated his workstation. Data flowed across the screens, showing the energy patterns that had disabled their ship. Chen studied the information with obvious understanding, her face growing grim. "Pulse cannon," she said quietly. "Military grade, probably mounted on a stealth ship. Someone wanted you disabled, not destroyed." The crew exchanged worried glances. They didn't understand most of what she had said, but her tone suggested serious danger. Dr. Mirana finally found her voice. "Commander, may I ask what species you represent? You're not in our databases, and your ship design is completely unknown to us." Chen turned those predator eyes on her. "We're human, from Earth, and judging by your reaction, you've never heard of us before." "Human," Veltar repeated slowly. "No, that species is not known to the Galactic Confederation." "Where is your homeworld located?" Something that might have been a smile crossed Chen's face, but it showed too many teeth to be comforting. About 15,000 light-years from here, give or take. We're new to this neighborhood. She gestured to one of her soldiers, who began connecting some kind of device to their ship's computer systems. Martinez, get their life support stabilized. Rodriguez, I want a full security sweep of this vessel. Something disabled them for a reason, and I want to know what that reason was. The soldiers moved with practiced efficiency. They worked on the ship's systems while maintaining constant awareness of their surroundings. Every movement was controlled and purposeful. These were beings who had been shaped by conflict. Dr. Mirana felt overwhelmed by the emotional patterns radiating from the humans. Their minds were unlike anything she had ever encountered. Where Confederation species thought in terms of harmony and cooperation, these beings thought in terms of threats and responses. They planned for violence even while helping others. Commander, she said carefully, your people seem very focused on conflict. Is your species at war? Chen laughed, and the sound was harsh and bitter. Lady, we're always at war. If we're not fighting someone else, we're fighting our environment, our diseases, or each other. It's what we do. The crew of Harmony's Light stared at her in shock. The idea of a species that was constantly in conflict was horrifying to them. How could such beings develop intelligence? How could they build spaceships while fighting each other? But that's impossible, Veltar protested. Intelligent species naturally develop beyond violence. Cooperation and peace are the foundations of civilization. Chen studied him with what looked like genuine curiosity. Is that so? And how many intelligent species have you met? Hundreds, Veltar replied proudly. The Confederation includes over 300 peaceful races. All peaceful? Of course. Violence is the mark of primitive thinking. Once a species develops true intelligence, they abandon such crude methods. Chen was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Then she spoke to one of her soldiers in their own language. The words were sharp and guttural, nothing like the flowing tones of Confederation speech. Interesting, she said finally. Rodriguez, what's your assessment of these people? The soldier she addressed was smaller than Chen, but moved with the same predatory grace. No weapons, no armor, no defensive positions. They're completely helpless, Commander. Like children. That's what I thought. Chen looked back at Veltar. Captain, I need to ask you something important. Has anyone from your Confederation ever encountered a hostile alien species? Hostile? Veltar looked confused. What do you mean? I mean aliens that attack without provocation. Aliens that want to hurt you or take what you have. The question seemed to puzzle the entire crew. Dr. Silera spoke up. Commander, all intelligent life naturally develops empathy and cooperation. Aggression is an evolutionary dead end. Species that remain violent destroy themselves before achieving space travel. Chen exchanged looks with her soldiers. Martinez, how long until their life support is stable? 20 minutes, Commander. Good, Captain Veltar, I need to see your navigation charts. All of them. Kolvac activated the star charts at Chen's request. The display showed hundreds of systems, all marked with the peaceful symbols of Confederation worlds. Chen studied the map with growing concern. This entire region, she said, pointing to a vast area of space. All peaceful species? Yes, Veltar confirmed. The Confederation has brought harmony to this entire spiral arm of the galaxy. And you've never encountered anyone who didn't want to join your peaceful club? Well, no. Why would anyone reject peace and cooperation? Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was grim. Because, Captain, there are things out there that don't care about your peace, things that see your cooperation as weakness to be exploited. She gestured to the sensor data showing the weapon blast that had disabled their ship. Someone attacked you. Someone with military-grade weapons who wanted you alive but helpless. That's not the behavior of a peaceful species. The crew looked at each other with growing alarm. The idea that someone would attack them without cause was completely outside their understanding of how the universe worked. Dr. Mirana felt a chill run through her. Are you saying there are violent species still out there? Species that haven't learned to be civilized? Lady, where I come from, the civilized species are the ones who learned how to fight smart, not the ones who forgot how to fight at all. Commander Chen activated her communication device and spoke rapidly in her own language. The words were too fast for the translator to follow, but her tone suggested urgency. Commander, Veltar asked nervously, what are you doing? Calling for backup, Chen replied. If someone's hunting peaceful species in this region, my people need to know about it. And you're going to need protection. Protection from what? Chen looked at him with something that might have been pity. From the kind of species that sees a ship full of helpless scientists as easy prey. From the kind of beings that attack first and never bother asking questions. She paused, studying their confused faces. Captain, your people have been very lucky. You've lived in a bubble of peace so complete that you've forgotten why some species need to be ready for war. But that bubble just got a hole in it. The lights on the bridge flickered as Chen's soldiers completed their work on the life support systems. The air began to smell fresher and the crew felt their breathing become easier. There, said the soldier called Martinez. That should keep you breathing for another week, easy? Chen nodded to her team. Good work. Now let's get them back to our ship. I want to put some armor between these people and whatever's hunting them. As her soldiers prepared to escort the crew to safety, Dr. Mirana realized something that filled her with dread. These humans, these violent and aggressive beings, were trying to protect them from something even worse. What kind of universe had they been living in, where creatures like humans were considered the good guys? The human ship was a revelation of controlled violence. As Commander Chen led the crew of Harmony's Light through the corridors, they saw technology designed for war at every turn. Weapons lined the walls in secure racks. Armor hung in ready positions. Emergency stations were clearly marked for damage control during battle. The crew huddled together as they walked, overwhelmed by the aggressive efficiency of their surroundings. Everything was built for function rather than beauty. The walls were thick metal instead of the elegant composite materials used by Confederation ships. The lighting was harsh and practical rather than the soft, warming glow they were used to. This is our briefing room, Chen said, leading them into a large chamber. You'll be safe here while we figure out what to do with you. The room was dominated by a massive table surrounded by chairs that looked more like command positions than furniture. Screens covered the walls showing star charts, tactical displays, and what appeared to be surveillance footage from dozens of different worlds. Dr. Mirana sat down carefully, still feeling the overwhelming emotions radiating from the humans around them. Commander, may I ask about your homeworld? You said it's called Earth? Chen settled into a chair across from them. Without her helmet, she looked more human but no less dangerous. That's right, Earth, third planet from a yellow star. Population about 12 billion last I checked. 12 billion? Veltar looked shocked. How do you maintain peace with so many people on one world? We don't, Chen replied bluntly. We fight. We compete. We argue and disagree, and sometimes we go to war with each other. It's what we've always done. Engineer Kolvak leaned forward, his logical mind struggling with the concept. But how do you accomplish anything if you're always fighting? How do you build cities or develop technology? We fight smarter, Chen explained. We learn that working together makes us stronger, even if we don't always like each other. We compete to see who can build the best cities, develop the best technology, create the best art. Competition drives us to excel. She activated one of the wall screens, showing images of Earth. The crew gasped at what they saw. Massive cities stretched across continents, but they were unlike any Confederation settlements. These cities looked like fortresses built to withstand attack. Roads and bridges were constructed with military precision. This is human civilization, Chen said. We build everything assuming someone might try to destroy it. Because on Earth something usually does. The images changed, showing the planet's surface, where Confederation worlds were garden paradises. Earth looked hostile and dangerous. Storms raged across oceans. Mountains erupted with fire. Deserts baked under merciless suns while frozen wastelands stretched across polar regions. Your world tried to kill you, Dr. Solara whispered in horror. Every day, Chen confirmed. Earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, floods, droughts, ice ages. Earth threw everything it had at us and we survived it all. We got stronger. She showed them more images. Animals that looked like they were designed specifically for killing. Predators with massive teeth and claws. Creatures that could crush a human with ease. Plants that were poisonous to touch. We shared our world with things that wanted to eat us, Chen continued. So we learned to fight back. We developed tools, weapons, strategies. We became the apex predators on our own planet. Veltar felt sick. The idea of living in constant danger was completely alien to him. How did you ever develop philosophy or art in such an environment? Chen smiled, and for the first time it looked genuinely warm. Because we had to. When everything is trying to kill you, you need something to live for. We created beauty to remind ourselves why survival was worth the effort. She showed them human art, paintings of impossible beauty, music that stirred emotions they didn't know existed, sculptures that captured the essence of struggle and triumph. It was art born from conflict, shaped by the need to find meaning in chaos. We learned that courage isn't the absence of fear, Chen explained. It's doing what needs to be done despite being afraid. We learned that true strength comes from protecting those who can't protect themselves. Dr. Mirana felt tears in her eyes. The emotional resonance coming from the humans was unlike anything she had experienced. Their minds were scarred by violence and loss, but also filled with determination and hope that blazed like stars. "Commander," she said softly, "you said we might be in danger." "What did you mean?" Chen's expression grew serious again. "The weapon signature that disabled your ship. We've seen it before. There's a species out there that my people have encountered. They call themselves the Devourers." She activated another screen, showing images that made the crew recoil in horror. The beings were insectoid with multiple arms ending in razor-sharp claws. Their faces were all teeth and hunger. They moved with predatory grace that made even the humans look peaceful by comparison. "They don't negotiate," Chen continued. "They don't communicate. They find peaceful species, disable their ships, and harvest them. They use advanced races as slaves and food sources." Food sources. Kolvak's logical mind couldn't process the concept. "But that's impossible. No intelligent species would—" "These aren't like the species you know," Chen interrupted. "They evolved from hive insects on a world that made Earth look like a vacation resort. They see all other life as either useful or food. There's no middle ground." The room fell silent as the crew tried to understand what they were being told. A species that viewed other intelligent beings as prey was beyond their comprehension. "How do you fight something like that?" Veltar asked. "The same way we fought everything else on Earth," Chen replied, "together with better weapons and tactics. My species has been preparing for this kind of threat our entire history." She showed them human military technology, weapons that could destroy entire fleets, armor that could withstand incredible punishment, ships designed specifically for war against overwhelming odds. "We've been fighting the Devourers for 2 years now," Chen explained. "They hit our outer colonies first, thinking we'd be easy prey like the other species they'd encountered. They were wrong. The screen showed battle footage that made the crew sick with horror. Human ships exchanging fire with alien vessels and displays of violence they had never imagined. Explosions that could be seen from space. The wreckage of civilizations caught in the crossfire. We stopped them," Chen said quietly. "But it cost us. We lost entire worlds before we learned how to fight them effectively, and now they're moving into this region of space." Dr. Silara looked up with dawning horror. "That's why they disabled our ship. They were testing us, seeing if we would fight back." "Probably," Chen agreed. "And when they realized you couldn't defend yourselves, they would have come back to collect you. Your entire crew would have ended up in their breeding pens." The crew sat in stunned silence, trying to process this information. Their entire understanding of the universe had been shattered in a matter of hours. "What happens now?" Veltar asked. Chen stood up, every movement radiating deadly purpose. "Now you learn why the galaxy needs species like mine. Why sometimes the only way to preserve peace is to be better at war than those who would destroy it." She activated her communication device. "Martinez, get me Admiral Harrison. Tell him we found survivors from a Devourer probe attack, and tell him we're going to need the full battle group out here." As she spoke, the crew of Harmony's Light realized their rescue was just the beginning. They had been saved from one horror only to discover that the universe was full of them. But for the first time since their ship had been disabled, they felt something they hadn't expected to feel. Again, they felt safe, because standing between them and the darkness were beings who had been forged by violence into something stronger than the threats they faced. They were under the protection of humanity, and humanity, they were beginning to understand, did not abandon those it chose to defend. 3 days later, the crew of Harmony's Light stood in the observation deck of the human battleship Indomitable, watching something they had never thought possible. Before them stretched a fleet of human warships, their dark hulls bristling with weapons, preparing for battle against an enemy that viewed all other life as prey. Admiral Harrison was a weathered man with gray hair and scars that told stories of countless conflicts. He stood next to Captain Veltar, pointing out features of the fleet formation to the confused Altarian. "Each ship has a specific role," Harrison explained in his gravelly voice. The destroyers provide screening and reconnaissance. The cruisers handle medium-range engagements. The battleships deliver the heavy firepower. And the carriers launch our fighters. Veltar watched the organized chaos with growing amazement. Hundreds of small craft moved between the larger ships like schools of fish. Supply vessels transferred ammunition and fuel. Medical ships prepared to receive casualties. Everything moved with purpose and deadly efficiency. "How many ships do you have?" he asked. "This battle group? About 200 vessels. But this is just one of 12 such groups spread across our territory." The numbers were staggering. The entire Confederation fleet consisted of perhaps 50 ships total, all designed for peaceful exploration. These humans had built an armada capable of fighting wars across multiple star systems. Dr. Mirana joined them at the observation window. Over the past 3 days, she had been studying human psychology with growing fascination. Their emotional patterns were unlike anything in Confederation experience, but they weren't evil or primitive as she had first thought. "Admiral," she said, "I've been analyzing your crew's mental states. They're afraid of the coming battle, but they're also determined to protect us. Why do they care about strangers they just met?" Harrison smiled, and like Commander Chen's smiles, it showed too many teeth. But there was warmth in his eyes that hadn't been there when they first met. "Because that's what humans do," he said simply. "We protect those who can't protect themselves. It's not always logical, but it's who we are." Engineer Kolvak approached with a datapad full of technical specifications. He had spent the last 3 days studying human technology, with the desperate intensity of someone trying to understand a completely foreign concept. "Admiral, your weapons technology is incredible, but I don't understand the design philosophy. Why build such destructive devices? Because sometimes, Engineer, the only way to preserve life is to be very good at taking it away from those who threaten innocent people." On the main display screen, tactical data flowed in patterns that hurt to look at. Ship positions, weapon ranges, predicted enemy movements, all the calculations needed to coordinate death on an industrial scale. The crew of Harmony's Light watched human officers work with quiet efficiency, preparing for violence they hoped wouldn't come but knew probably would. "Contact," announced the tactical officer. Devourer fleet detected at the edge of the system, 47 vessels moving in standard harvest formation. Admiral Harrison's expression hardened. "All ships prepare for battle. Condition 1 throughout the fleet." Alarms began to sound. Not the gentle chimes used on Confederation ships, but harsh, urgent warnings that demanded immediate attention. Throughout the fleet, thousands of humans prepared for war with the calm professionalism of a species that had been doing it for millennia. Captain Veltar watched the tactical display with growing horror as enemy ships appeared at the system's edge. The Devourer vessels looked like nightmares made real, organic curves covered in weapon clusters, moving with predatory grace toward the human fleet. "They outnumber you," he observed. "They outgun us too," Harrison replied calmly. "But we have advantages they don't expect." On the screen, the human fleet began to move. Instead of charging directly at the enemy, they spread out in a complex pattern that looked chaotic but was actually carefully coordinated. The Devourers continued their advance, confident in their numerical superiority. "What advantages?" Dr. Silara asked. Commander Chen's voice came over the communication system from her ship. "We know how to lose, Admiral. More importantly, we know how to lose and keep fighting anyway." The first exchange of fire lit up space with deadly beauty. Energy beams and projectile weapons created a light show that would have been magnificent if it wasn't so terrifying. Human ships took hits and kept fighting. Devourer vessels exploded in brief, brilliant stars. Dr. Mirana felt the emotional output from both fleets and gasped at the difference. The Devourers radiated hunger and cruel anticipation. They expected an easy victory against primitives. The humans projected something else entirely. Grim determination mixed with protective fury. "They're not fighting for conquest," she realized. "They're fighting for us." The battle raged for hours. Human ships died in nuclear fire, their crews making final sacrifices to protect the fleet. But for every human vessel destroyed, 2 or 3 Devourer ships met the same fate. The aliens had expected easy prey and found apex predators instead. Captain Veltar watched a human destroyer ram itself into a Devourer cruiser, both ships disappearing in a flash of antimatter. The crew of that destroyer had chosen to die rather than let the enemy ship reach the civilians they were protecting. "Why?" he whispered. Why would they sacrifice themselves for strangers? Admiral Harrison heard him. Because that's what civilization really means. Not the absence of violence, but the willingness to use violence to protect those who can't protect themselves. The tide of battle turned as human tactics proved superior to devourer aggression. The aliens were individually stronger and more numerous, but they had never faced an enemy that could coordinate so effectively while taking such heavy losses. Enemy fleet is breaking formation, reported the tactical officer. They're trying to retreat. Let them go, Harrison ordered. But make sure they carry a message back to their masters. As the surviving devourer ships fled the system, the human fleet regrouped. Rescue ships moved to collect survivors from destroyed vessels. Medical ships prepared to treat the wounded. The fleet mourned its dead while celebrating its victory. In the observation deck, the crew of Harmony's Light tried to process what they had witnessed. Everything they thought they knew about civilization had been turned upside down. Admiral, Veltar said slowly, we need to return to Confederation space. Our people need to know about this threat. Agreed. But Captain, you also need to tell them about the solution. Solution? Harrison gestured toward the human fleet. Your people survived for thousands of years because you were lucky. You lived in a peaceful bubble while species like the Devourers destroyed less fortunate civilizations. But that bubble is gone now. He activated a star chart showing the local region of space. Red zones marked areas where Devourer attacks had been reported. The peaceful worlds of the Confederation were directly in their path. Your people have two choices, Harrison continued. They can learn to fight or they can become prey. There's no middle ground anymore. Dr. Mirana looked at the tactical displays with new understanding. You're offering to teach us. We're offering to stand with you, Commander Chen's voice came through the speakers. Humans don't abandon allies, ever. Engineer Kolvak studied the human technology readouts. It would take decades to build weapons like yours. Our people don't even understand the concept of warfare. Then we'll teach them, Harrison said simply, starting with the basic principle that sometimes the most peaceful thing you can do is be very good at war. Captain Veltar felt a strange emotion growing in his chest, something he had never experienced before. It took him several moments to recognize it as hope mixed with determination. For the first time in his life, he was thinking about fighting for something instead of just studying it. What do we do first? He asked. Admiral Harrison smiled, and this time it didn't look predatory at all. It looked like the expression of someone welcoming new family members. First, we get you home safely. Then we start teaching your people that civilization isn't about avoiding conflict. It's about winning the conflicts that matter. As the human fleet prepared to escort Harmony's Light back to Confederation space, the crew stood together at the observation window. They were returning to their people as changed beings, carrying knowledge that would transform their entire civilization. They had learned that the universe was more dangerous than they had ever imagined. But they had also learned that they weren't alone in facing that danger. Humanity had answered their distress call and shown them a different kind of civilization, one built not on the absence of violence, but on the wisdom to use violence in service of protecting the innocent. The stars ahead looked different now, still beautiful but no longer peaceful. The galaxy was vast and full of threats that peaceful species couldn't handle alone. But it was also full of allies willing to stand between the darkness and the light. And sometimes, those allies looked like monsters until you realized they were the only thing standing between you and the real monsters that lurked in the void. The crew of Harmony's Light had sent out a distress call hoping for rescue. They had received something far more valuable. They had found humanity. And humanity, they now understood, did not let friends face the darkness alone.